Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Doc Abante. I'm Verdina Crisantamitin Duenas, and my topic is about Data Privacy Act of 2012. According to Global Web Index via data reportal, the average daily social media usage of Filipinos in 2020 was 3 hours and 50 minutes. And according to some researchers, Filipinos spend a significant amount of time accessing the internet, which is often accompanied by their frequent use of social media. Based on the data available, it can be determined that roughly 63% of the population of the Philippines, which is estimated to be around 67 million people out of the population of 105.7 million, have the ability to access the internet. A significant proportion of internet users in the Philippines use social media platforms such as Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and among others. In the Philippines, people spend a lot of time on social media, which has had a major effect on how they talk to one another. Many people nowadays have adapted to a lifestyle of constant availability. The Philippines does not have an information based society, but it does have many of the features of a network culture. The changing definition of privacy in the Philippines is a result of the development of ICT, or the Information and Communication Technology. It's a common misconception that the concept of privacy may be applied everywhere due to differences in the meaning across different legal systems. A universal definition of privacy is difficult to develop. The traditional concept of privacy is summed up as the privilege of being left alone. The right to privacy has been defined as the state of being free from intrusion by others, whether that intrusion is physical or verbal, and whether or not the matter at hand is of public concern. The common understanding of privacy in the Philippines is that everyone has the right to be left alone in their homes, offices, and other places where they have a reasonable expectation of privacy. The government or state cannot access these areas without a warrant. The right of a person to control the dissemination of information about oneself is also known as informational privacy. It has emerged from a result of technological progress. In the context of social media, privacy refers to a user's control over who can see their profile and messages, as well as how that information can be used. Therefore, it is imperative to give greater consideration to safeguarding the personal informations of users on online platforms, as well as informations contained in physical documents. As per the report, instances of fraudulent activities and violations of privacy persistently exhibit an upward trend. It is important that both governmental and non governmental institutions adhere strictly and with utmost seriousness to the implementation of Data Privacy Act of 2012. The Republic Act number 10173, also known as the Data Privacy Act of 2012, was enacted in the Philippines in compliance with the country's commitment under ASEAN Vision. It is an act protecting individual personal information in information and communication systems in the government and the private sector, creating for this purpose a National Privacy Commission and other purposes. So basically, both public and private institutions have to make sure that any personal data they collect is kept safe and private. This includes things like processing personal information and sensitive personal information. So it outlines when and how personal information can be processed, with the main idea being that it requires direct consent from the person whose data is being processed. It is the policy of the state to protect the fundamental human right of privacy of communication while ensuring free flow of information to promote innovation and growth. So basically, the Data Privacy Act is there to make sure that our personal information and communication systems are safe and protected, whether we're dealing with the government or private companies. It is just part of our company's responsibility to keep our information secure. The scope of the DPA. This act applies to processing of all types of personal information and to any natural and juridical person involved in processing of personal information, including those personal information controllers and processor who, although not found or established in the Philippines, except for certain special cases. So these special cases are information about any individual who is or was an officer or employee of a government institution that relates to the position or function. This includes facts of the individual like age, address, telephone number, position, business address, office telephone, salary range, responsibilities, etc. Next is information about an individual who is or was performing services under contract for a government institution that relates to the services performed. Next is information relating to any discretionary benefit of a financial nature, such as granting of a license or permit. Next is personal information processed for journalistic, artistic, or literary purposes in order to uphold freedom of speech, expression, or of the press. Next is personal information processed for research purposes intended for public benefit. Next is information necessary for carrying out functions of a public authority in accordance with constitutionally or statutorily mandated function pertaining to enforcement or regulatory functions. Next is information necessary for bank and financial institutions. Last is personal information originally collected from residents of foreign jurisdiction in accordance with their data privacy law. So the key officials or key actors of the DPA would be number one, the National Privacy Commission. It is an independent body that mandated to administer and implement the DPA. So next is data subjects. Data subjects refers to individual whose personal information is processed. Number three is the Personal Information Controller or the PIC. It refers to a person or organization who controls the collection, holding, processing, or the use of personal information, including a person or organization who instruct another or organization to collect, hold, process, use, transfer, or disclose personal information on his or her behalf. However, it exclude those who were instructed by another person or organization and those who collect, holds, processes, or uses personal information in connection with the individual's personal, family, or household affairs. So last is the Personal Information Processor or the PIP. It refers to any natural or juridical person qualified to act as such under this act or whom a personal information controller may outsource the processing of personal data pertaining to a data subject. So, what is the meaning of personal information? So, it refers to any information, whether recorded in a material form or not, from which the identity of an individual is apparent or can be reasonably and directly ascertained by the entity holding the information, or when put together with other information, would directly and certainly identify an individual. So, in processing uh, personal information, there should be lawful criteria. There should be consent, contract with the individual, vital interest or life and health, legal obligation, national emergency or public order, and safety as prescribed by law, constitutional or statutory mandate of a public authority, and legitimate interest of the PIC or the third parties. So, what about the sensitive personal information? It refers to information of individuals' race, ethnic origin, marital status, age, color, religious, philosophical, or political affiliations, health, education, genetic or sexual life, any proceedings for any offense committed or alleged to have been committed by an individual, government issued IDs, and those established by an executive order or an act of Congress to be kept classified. The lawful criteria for processing of the SPI are: there should be consent, there should be existing laws and regulations, life and death, processing by non-stock, non-profit organizations, medical treatment, and lawful rights and interest in court proceedings or legal claims. So, how about the privileged information? Privileged information are those any and all forms of data which, under rules of courts and other pertinent law, constitute privileged communication, which includes those information that passes between husband and wife, law and client, doctor and patient, priest and penitent, and the executive privilege. According to Section 15 of the DPA, extension of privileged communication, personal information controllers may invoke the principle of privileged communication over privileged information that they lawfully control or process. Subject to existing laws and regulations, any evidence gathered on privileged information is inadmissible. According to legal provisions, individuals whose data is being processed have certain entitlements, commonly referred to as rights, which can be exercised to safeguard their privacy. Rights under DPA are: number one, the right to be informed. This is a fundamental right that gives you a power to take actions to protect your privacy and assert your other privacy rights. Next is the right to access. Under the DPA, you have the right to ask an organization for a copy of any information they have about you in their computer database or manual filing system. Next is the right to object. If you gave your consent, or if there is a legitimate interest involved, you can exercise this right. Number 4 is the right to erasure or blocking. You have the right to suspend, withdraw, or even order to blocking, removal, or destruction of your personal data. Next is the right to rectify. If you ever notice any mistakes or inaccuracies in the personal information that a company has about you, you have the right to dispute it and have it corrected. It is important to make sure that your information is correct and up to date. Next is the right to portability. You have the right to request a copy of your personal information from the organization that has it. They should provide it to you in an electronic or structured format. Next is the right to damages. If your personal data was used inaccurately, incompletely, falsely, or without your permission, you might be able to get compensation for any damages you suffered. This includes any violation of your rights and freedom as a data subject. And the last is the right to file a complaint. In the event of a violation of your privacy rights, you have you may file your complaint. Nonetheless, the applicability and transmissibility of these rights are subject to certain limitations. The NPC facilitates useful channels for individuals to submit their inquiries and grievances pertaining to data confidentiality and the implementation of data subject entitlements. So aside from the eight rights of data subjects, the Philippine DPA is based on three general data privacy principles. So number one principle is transparency. It is the awareness of the data subject on the nature, purpose, and extent relevant to the processing of their personal information. It is when someone knows all the important data about how their personal information is being used. Number two is legitimate purpose. The data should be processed fairly and lawfully. So basically, when we process personal data, we need to have a clear and lawful purpose for doing so. And so, of course, this purpose should be in line with what's considered right and acceptable by the society. The last principle is the proportionality. The processed information should be adequate, relevant, suitable, necessary, and non-excessive in relation to declared and specified purpose. The law says that companies who handle our personal information can collect, process, or keep more data than they really need. So basically, you should only use someone's personal information for the reason that you told them you would use it for. On the other hand, the legal framework, particularly the implementing rules and regulations, or IRR, and subsequent advisory opinions circulated by the NPC, also specify the responsibilities and legal obligations of the PIC and the PIP. The NPC has provided guidance to adhere to specific duties within a system of responsibility and adherence that is based on its five pillars of compliance. So, the number one in the five pillars is appoint a data protection officer. The PIP and the PIC are required to appoint or designate a DPO or compliance officer. They will be responsible for making sure that everything related to data protection and privacy follows the rules and regulations. Next is conduct a privacy and impact assessment, or the PIA. This is a way to assess and handle how a program or process affects the data privacy. Next is the Create Your Privacy Management Program. So basically, the privacy management program helps everyone in the organization work together towards the same goal of following the rules and regulations about data protection. It also helps the organization prepare for and handle any potential data breaches. Next is implement your privacy and data protection, or the PDP measures. It is important to make sure that privacy and data protection measures are not just theoretical. There should be constant checking and updating them as needed, and make sure to do training on regular basis. And last is regularly exercise your breach reporting procedures. The objective is to facilitate the government and private industries in the adoption of organizational, technical, and physical security protocols that ensures the appropriate and sufficient safeguarding of personal data. The individuals in charge of processing personal information, known as PIC and PIP, may face criminal liability in the event of data breach. The law stipulates those penalties, including fines and imprisonment. may be imposed based on the severity of the offense. Acts of improper access, whether they are intentional or result from negligence, unauthorized processing, handling, or disposal of personal and sensitive information, and other unlawful acts, will be subject to penalties as outlined on the screen. So, this concludes my report. Thank you for listening.